And good evening to our fellow listeners and followers. Today's Sunday, November 19th at 8:24 p.m. This is Federico Lines of States Rights Radio and
Seth Hancock of Seth Hancock Reports. And tonight's episode, Debunking Political Civil War History That No One Wants to Discuss. We're going to be discussing the Civil War and, how a lot of the centralization of power in Washington kind of had its start under Abraham Lincoln and, this fight between two wrong sides, I guess you could say. There wasn't a good side and a bad side. I think it was all, we were just discussing before we started, really rich men in the South and rich men in the North sending off poor people to die for their own warped causes. It's one of these topics that I think is important to discuss because we have this kind of romanticization of the Civil War, as it was the war to end slavery, and there are a lot of people who think this, this shows America's righteousness that we went to war with each other, which, like, to me, it's like, that's kind of sick. Right? Every other country in the West that got rid of slavery did it without going to war. They did it with peaceful means. This is the bloodiest war in American history. 700,000 Americans died. This isn't something to romanticize, and it's kind of a touchy subject because we're dealing with, obviously chattel slavery in America and many other Western nations was abhorrent and wrong, but how do you get rid of it in the most just manner possible? I think going to war is the wrong way, and we have a lot of problems today because of the power that Washington, D.C. took during the Civil War. It's a subject that I think we need to have a more honest discussion on.
No, yeah, you're right, Seth, and you hit the nail. This, we need to really end this romanticization and fantasy of, this lost cause that the South likes to portray, and the North likes to, put the South as the evil one, and vice versa, because the Southerners call it the War of Northern Aggression. But once you start reading about it, there was really no aggression from the North, because all the aggression was, again, from the South. And the South used the federal government to protect their investment, protect their livelihood, and grant them privilege, and deny the privilege of other states. And that kind of bloated the federal government to, what it is today. And, who can we really blame for this, for this bloating of the federal government into the massive bureaucracy that we see now? Because with the passage of the Fugitive Slave Law and with the Supreme Court rulings that deny states to nullify and refuse to cooperate of this law, you saw the federal government increase into unbelievable proportions into it. So, who can we really blame for this? Because that's not what the federal government was supposed to be. The federal government it's not supposed to give privilege to one state and deny it to another state. And this, so in the end, who was the aggressor here? Could it be both sides the aggressor? Could it be the South the aggressor, the North? So that's a question I'd like to bring to my followers. Who was the aggressor here? Well, who do you think was the aggressor here, Seth?
That's a tough thing to answer, simply because I think in terms of starting the war, I would say it would be the North. But I also have to recognize that, the South was, engaged in this slave trade, and that in and of itself is aggressive against the individuals who were kidnapped and brought over here. But I would say both sides are to blame in terms of the aggression. But on the other hand, as I brought up, the South had the slave trade going. So did the North. That's something we forget about. It's that slavery was legal in the North, and, Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation targeted Southern states to say that you're not allowed to have slavery, but he exempted 1 million slaves under Northern control from being freed. So, to Lincoln, it wasn't about slavery to him, I don't believe. And to him, I think it was about preserving the ability to tax the Southern states, and it was about controlling the Southern states. It wasn't about ending slavery. But, it's a very complex topic when you look at the statements from these people at this time. Lincoln was famous for talking about in his first inaugural address that if he can preserve the Union without ending slavery, he would be happy to do that. But you move forward to once the Civil War started, he'd sound like an abolitionist, which I don't believe he was. But I think Lincoln represented the kind of two-faced politician that we're used to today, where they're on all sides of every issue.
Yeah, you're right. And that's something the romanization of both Republicans and Democrats, that they portray Lincoln as a savior to end slavery, but in reality, the only reason why Lincoln presented his executive order of emancipation was because he realized that the South was winning the war, and until they get up to Gettysburg. But before Gettysburg, he didn't want to declare the United States a slave nation. And again, you're right. In his inaugural address, he said and quoted that he would preserve the Union with the extension of slavery in the southern states. Now, the compromise that he proposed was that he would rather keep the slave states as is, the southern states, but no new. And that's really where the Manifest Destiny came about. No new slave, no new. On the federal territories, that they wouldn't become slave states, and you had the Kansas and Nebraska situations, and the Missouri Compromise and all that. But the thing, I think it goes a little beyond Lincoln, and where many framers' heirs, even though a lot of the framers had slaves, they really believed that slavery was an abomination, even though they had slaves. But the Madison Monroe Plan was to, ship the entire African population out of the United States and move them to a certain nation in Africa, which was Liberia, and the capital of Liberia became Monrovia after James Monroe. But that wasn't really going to be in effect. But like I said, it goes beyond before Lincoln, where the framers' heirs never really understood the magnitude of the situation of how this nation works. And my concern is that, I repudiate slavery, but in order for people to evolve and people to realize what's going on and how can they make life better for themselves, they could look up at other states. For example, New York State had a ban on the importation of slaves, but the Supreme Court shut it down because, according to the Constitution, according to several interpreters of the Constitution, states are not allowed to regulate commerce. And so that went back to the federal government to say that we can regulate commerce and regulate the importation of human beings. and there you shut it down. So again, there was many individuals that didn't understand the concept, because again, if South Carolina wants to do business with Philadelphia, but Pennsylvania doesn't want to do business with South Carolina because they're involved in the slave trade, then Pennsylvania will go into another state that will do business, and we'll see the reduction of slave trade until the wisdom of South Carolina will say, hey, you know what? I'm not making money. Okay, fine. We'll reduce the slave trade. We'll give them some wages and all that. It's a concept of a league of states to work together to make a better union. But unfortunately, there's been certain individuals like Lincoln, Daniel Webster is one, and maybe Henry Clay is another one. John C. Calhoun's another one that, they're only thinking about themselves and not to the effects of the republic that we founded on.
Yeah, and a lot of the founding fathers, there were founding fathers who had slaves, and there were other founding fathers who didn't. But there were attempts. I mean, even people like George Washington would talk about the need. I mean, it's. This is something that's tough for people today to wrap their minds around, that, they grew up with this heinous practice called chattel slavery. So they were kind of used to it. I know it's tough to imagine, but a lot of them, even though they had slaves, knew that it was wrong. And a lot of the founding fathers wanted to make it clear from the start that slavery would be ended, but they didn't get that explicitly in the Constitution. But guys like John Quincy Adams, he was pushing for a constitutional amendment from the very start to end slavery, and he kept. After he was president, he kept on introducing this constitutional amendment, and that constitutional amendment kept being pushed even through Lincoln, and Lincoln did not want to go that route, which that would be the constitutional route. That would be the appropriate route to end slavery in America, is have a constitutional amendment. But instead, Lincoln put this he became a dictator who was arresting people for opposing him. He was arresting journalists who questioned the Civil War, and obviously started the Civil War, and it led to the bloodiest war in American history. So there were peaceful attempts from the very beginning of America, from the Constitution, from the Constitution being ratified. There were already peaceful attempts trying to be made to end slavery in America, and then ultimately we went the bad route of just killing each other. And it's not something to be proud of, in my opinion.
No, it's not. And a constitutional amendment, a national constitutional amendment to end slavery, while John C. Calhoun proposed in his Oregon Territory speech a national constitutional amendment to allow slavery. I mean, which one? Again, it comes in terms of a hint of federalism in this republic. I mean, I guess to end slavery, I mean, would you support a national constitutional amendment to end slavery, going against states' sovereign rights? But yet again, you're stopping the end of bondage. You want to stop bondage. But was that the correct route, being how this country is very different than the great, very different, like Great Britain or France or Germany or countries in Asia? I mean, again, it's, even though Lincoln opposed it, and Lincoln, imprisoned people. Lincoln, I don't think he was, in reality, I don't think he was a fine president that I really want to look up to, because during his before, while the Lincoln was still enforcing the fugitive slave law, and he was saying that if you want to, I don't want to treat you as a traitor. So he was still enforcing that act, and still wanting to preserve slavery and not move it into new territories. So this romanticization of both Democrats, now Democrats think Lincoln was a Democrat and Republicans kind of praise Lincoln in a little sick, twisted way. I wouldn't call Lincoln a great president. And yet again, I wouldn't call Jefferson Davis a great president because, again, I think both of them were both tyrants. Jefferson Davis had his central government in Richmond imprison people who were against the Confederate States of America and will bring up fake charges on it. So, both sides are not great. And this is as you and I started, and you quoted, romanticization of both sides that's kind of sickening in a way that, they're not telling the truth about it. Lincoln was no savior and Jefferson Davis was no savior. They're both just two bureaucrats wanted to obtain power and control. But in my initial statement at the beginning, would you support a national constitutional amendment to end slavery and debunking the source of federalism and all that, or would you move forward with it?
Yeah, I would have supported it. This is a strange thing to me because, nowhere in the Constitution does it recognize slavery as a right either. I have always looked at the original Constitution in its original form. I would say it already it recognizes the rights of individuals, and the problem is we had people kind of portraying black people as not humans, which that's the real problem. But if we recognize everybody as human beings, then the Constitution already banned slavery, in my opinion. But because we had this practice of slavery, I would have supported a constitutional amendment. But you go that route and you get the consent of the governed. There are going to be people who are going to fight back, and there might be some violence, but that's a lot less violence than a whole civil war. One of the things is that the majority of Southerners, the majority of Northerners, the majority of Americans didn't even own slaves. So it was actually a small percentage of the population that even owned slaves. So I find it hard to believe that we couldn't have ended this in any other means but war. I think we could have ended it with peaceful means, and it would have been cheaper to buy up all the slaves and free them than to fight a bloody war.
Yeah, no, you're right. And you mentioned that, you're right. A small percentage of Americans owned slaves and owned that slave production in cotton, tobacco, sugar. And as I mentioned before the show, that I think this was an aristocratic war, that only the upper class were, in it, were the main conspirators in this war. And the lower class did not. I mean, after Lincoln signed his executive order on emancipation, the central government in Richmond passed a 20 Negro law that anybody that owned more than 20 slaves were exempt from military service. Well, who was that? That was the upper class, and you saw that in the movie with Matthew McConaughey, Free State of Jones, that he said that this was, I don't have slaves, but I have to fight this war for these guys. And, it really is this whole idea was an upper class deceptive war. But not only that, and I want to go again into the spectrum prior to the war, that if the federal government didn't get involved in how northern states did their laws, we wouldn't have this situation. For example, the famous Supreme Court case of Dred Scott. This person traveled from Missouri to Wisconsin because his slave owner was a doctor. The doctor passed away, he died, and he remained in Wisconsin. Wisconsin gave him the right to be a citizen and the right to be a free man. But the Supreme Court, under the unwise decision of Roger Taney, a Marylander and also a slave owner, he denied the state's sovereign right to grant this person citizenship and liberty. And that, Seth, is an invasion of state sovereignty, of the very foundation how this republic was founded. South Carolina denied this right, but Wisconsin gave it. Why would you deny one state's sovereign right and grant the state of Missouri that right to bring him back to Missouri? That to me, shows privilege and shows contempt of the founding of this republic. That if Dred Scott would have been given his freedom by the state of Wisconsin, I don't think we would have had a civil war. I think we would have had a minimal war, probably a small militia banded together, but it wouldn't be into a 5-year battle that we went through. And I think it would have had a positive meaning and says, hey, Wisconsin wants to grant freedom to individuals, then maybe Tennessee would do it, or Louisiana would do it, because I think Louisiana were a little more moderate than South Carolina or Mississippi. So, that's the genius of this country that many people don't understand. We don't want a central government dictating this policy. We want the states to grow and see the differences of opinion and see how we can change it. So that's the thing that kind of, I want to debunk people to say that, at the end, a national constitutional amendment to end slavery, I think it's the right thing to do because, they were not going to listen. So I think they need to add it into the amendment, the legislative purposes, like they did in the House of Commons in the UK. But to do it while at war was wrong. I think they should have done it before, but unfortunately you had many Southerners that, were confounded in their own world of fantasy and the whole antebellum romanization of the old South that, kind of ruined it for all. But, people need to go back and read that Wisconsin was giving rights to citizens, to people of color, slaves, those freedoms. Pennsylvania was doing it. Illinois was doing it. Ohio was doing it. So if that idea came out, then I would say that there would have been a minimal effect of a civil war.
Yeah, and that's like I said at the very beginning, was that this romanticization of the Civil War, and a lot of Americans. Comes from a lot of people on the so-called right. Kind of pump up. Isn't it great that that we were willing to go to war to end slavery? I'm like, no, not really. It's when you look at the death and destruction of the Civil War, and you look at the fact that we are the only nation, and chattel slavery was ended in every other Western nation through peaceful means, that's not something to be proud of. It's just and just the ramifications of it down the line, and the power that the central controllers took in Washington, D.C. from it that are still affecting us today. You look at Lincoln was the first president to try to institute an income tax, which was rightly struck down by the Supreme Court at the time. But now the American people stupidly allowed it to come in 1913. It's there are a lot of ramifications that people need to understand. A lot of things, and ultimately, I think slavery's just kind of had a change in America. It's not that slavery ever really ended. It's just that well, it's done through different means today. I wrote about a couple weeks ago about the prison industrial complex, and how a lot of prisons are actually using prisoners who to effectively as slaves themselves, because they're being used for labor for even private industry in prisons and not getting paid for it. But you look at the ghettos in America today, and how many Americans are on government welfare and government benefits, and they're a lot of people can point at them and say, why are you lazy or whatever, and I agree to an extent on that, but it's kind of almost been forced upon them. And I think we still have slavery in America. We just don't call it slavery.
No, that's a very good point, Seth. Very good point. You're right. I mean, it's no longer forced labor, but it's some type of labor, of lazy labor. But still, again, I think after the passage of the 13th Amendment, and then the 14th and 15th Amendment, which rightly so, we are equal under the law, but yet, here comes the triumph of some members of the Democratic Party that just started to give money to fill this white guilt institution of Woodrow Wilson, FDR. Well, not much Woodrow Wilson, because I think he was a closeted bigot, but mostly FDR and LBJ, this white guilt institution. And but yet again, after the Civil War, there was a lot of contradiction to the Constitution made from 1865 to throughout the 1980s, where several states were denying these individuals the right to be a citizen. And yet, here again, the federal government comes in and says, oh, you know what? We'll give you this separate but equal nonsense, and you are equal, but you'll be separate. That's not what the Constitution is about. I mean, this institution of separate but equal nonsense, and this miscegenation law and anti-marriage laws that came about, no integrating for marriage or schools. I mean, this sense really goes against the basic constitutional right that you are denying equal justice under the law. And, but yet again, this is from this romanization of not now the aristocrats that were in power back then. This is from the common soldiery of the South that got control of that and instituted these policies of hatred and just pure nonsense that, made a mockery of the Constitution. And it's, the ramifications and effects, kind of got twisted with the white guilt and with the white racism, and then it kind of just mixed in together and created this reverse racism that it's really sad that we cannot really make everybody equal under law, regardless of the color of their skin or the sex or whatever. It's just sad that we've created a white guilt with white racism together, and we still honestly cannot get out of it, because we see police officers beating members of a lot of minority races, African Americans, Hispanics, Asians, and just not respecting their rights. And when can we really just come together? As Rodney King once said, why can't we all just get along? It's that simple. So I don't know what, one thing before, I had no idea that in 1917 the Supreme Court ruled that residential segregation was unconstitutional. and it was ceased to exist. But yet again, you had people, creating different things and not allowing blacks to own homes in white areas. I mean, if the Supreme Court said that residential segregation was unconstitutional, why did people keep doing it? Why people kept ignoring this? So, it's very sad that this thing is a stain on American history.
Yeah, and like bringing that up with residential segregation, you just look at the way we've, you look at the Civil War, look at the way we've treated these racial issues. It's caused divisions. It's not united us. It's separated us further apart. And you look at just go into a public school today, and there are a lot of very black majority schools, very white majority schools. But even in let's say a diverse school, you go look at the lunchroom during lunch, and you'll see that people are segregating themselves. Because it's just kind of what's forced on us through the way we've used these issues. So I think this has become the tradition since the Civil War to the solutions to problems are always ones that divide us further apart when we should be uniting around the cause of liberty. And we don't talk about liberty anymore in this country. It's all about what's the government doing for us. Well, I don't want the government to do anything for me except stay out of my way. I think we're further divided by the way we fight these battles, and we should be uniting together to oppose authoritarianism and oppose big government. But instead, we're having stupid, divisive politics that is not good for anybody.
No, it's not, and you get this white guilt situation where it's right just that after the Civil War, you had Buchanan versus Wardley that ended residential segregation. Then you had Brown versus Board that ended school segregation. You had Loving versus Virginia that ended marriage segregation. But yet again, which that's all fine and dandy. But then here comes in the 1970s, the city of Richmond, which was the cradle of the Confederacy, the cradle of the Confederate capital. And here comes your white guilt, Seth. They were giving bids to minority-owned companies a leg up, not a leg up, but offering it more to minority-owned companies for bidding contracts and denying white-owned companies that bidding position. And here's your white guilt. Why are they doing that? They should be offering it equally. And who's ever the most prosperous company gets that position. Well, the Supreme Court said that they couldn't do that. And, the Supreme Court said that, they shouldn't do that because that creates inequality. That creates privilege to give one race and not the other. The same thing is to give it to one religion, not the other religion. And the government's not supposed to give privilege under law. It's supposed to give equality under law. So, but there's your white guilt that turns that reverse racism that I think kind of hurts with affirmative action. That it creates more of a divided nation instead of showing equality. Yes, I understand that, the Supreme Court gave Plessy versus Ferguson a leg up to the whites and not to the minority-owned individuals, which that was wrong. But it also, Richmond versus the city of Richmond was wrong as well when they were doing that same aspect, but on the other side. We just need to really come together as a nation. Regardless of who you are, we are Americans, and we need to come forth together. For example, in 1936, when we saw Joe Louis defeat Max Schmeling, a German. No, I think he was German. I think it was German, yeah. Max Schmeling, defeat Max Schmeling, white versus black. But everybody came forward and cheered for Joe Louis. The same thing with Jesse Owens, and so on. Even in 1989, even in Rocky, I cheered for Apollo Creed versus Rocky Balboa. But yet again, we came together because, but again, I was cheering for Apollo Creed against the Soviet because he's an American against the Soviet enemies. So we need to come together in this and really realize that America is, equality under law, not privilege under law.
Yeah, and it's that's what we really need to focus on is what exactly is liberty? What are I always talk about, I don't like talking about racial issues outside of saying that, we're all part of the same race, the human race. And we need to stop acting like one race is superior than the other. And then that's the problem right there. We need to all be for liberty and justice for all, and we just need to work together to fight off the tyranny and authoritarianism that's been in place for over a century, and we've seen how big the government's gotten in just the last couple of years with the COVID lies, and people are slowly kind of waking up to the military-industrial complex, but these are the things that we need to be uniting against, and but we still have these kind of social issues that stem all the way back to the way we fought the Civil War, and it just causes this divisive atmosphere that it helps the ruling class. It helps the central controllers. It helps them keep their power and control over us if they have us constantly divided.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and they did that in the 1850s. They did that in the 1950s. 1960s they changed, but yeah, the central government always wants us, to install fear and hatred, and that's not really what this country was all about. And that's why, again, my question is, who really was the aggressor here? Because the North wanted to abolish this institution, this labor institution known as slavery, while the South wanted to maintain it. But yet again, you look at what the South's activities were. They installed Manifest Destiny. They installed the Fugitive Slave Act. They installed, a Southern judge who told states that they couldn't grant citizenship to black individuals, and that's why Dred Scott couldn't be a citizen of this country, and that was wrong. In the famous speech of Frederick Douglass in discussing the 4th of July, he's plainly said, "This is not my holiday because I have no freedom, I have no liberty," and that's not right. And that's why I think a national constitutional amendment like they had in UK was the right thing to do. But, once you deny the primary reason for this country, which is a sovereign state of whatever, a sovereign state to own slaves or a sovereign state to ban slavery, once you deny that, then you are looking up to a central authority. And that kind of is sad because the early framers were so misguided and didn't quite understood the writings of Madison and Jefferson that even though they both owned slaves, they wanted the slavery institution. They wanted off this planet, just not the means that it came about in 1861. But the framers, the heirs to the framers, didn't really grasp the nature of this country, and now we are grasping into totally way off to what the framers intended this republic to be. We are now into a new world central government authority for everything, for agriculture, for transportation, for education, for healthcare, that the framers would have said, whoa, 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 wait a minute, this is not what we're supposed to be. So, I mean, it really took a toll into another way, and I think the aggressor is honestly the South, because they really impose things against federalism, against other country, against the other members of this country, to impose their lifestyle, and that's not how you do it. I mean, for example, we had a case that we discussed where California didn't want to buy Missouri pork because Missouri pork did not treat well their pork and their pigs. Well, that's fine. If California wants to do no business with Missouri because they don't like the way they treat their pigs, then Missouri will go somewhere else to sell their pork. And California will go to Oregon or China or whoever, which, again, China probably doesn't give good health standards. But, that's the beauty of this country, is that if you don't like the way we do business, then you go somewhere else to do business. And then that will change the mind of Missouri to say, hey, maybe we need to do a better treatment of our pigs or whatever. So that's the nature of this country that people from today and before don't really understand, and unfortunately we're into a whole new central government.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I think on both the North and the South in the Civil War were really opposed to states' rights, and we should all be for states' rights, and we've lost our uniqueness. I mean, when we had states' rights, each state had unique things, and we've become such a corporatized society that it's all the mega corporations. They drive out all the unique small businesses that might offer things that are pretty cool that we don't get anymore, because we're just trying to make everybody the same, when we should recognize and celebrate our differences. Obviously there are differences that might not be worth celebrating, but the ability to be different should be celebrated. We should be individuals, not part of collectives and part of groups. We should promote individualism within the states. Each state has different things to offer, and we need to stop trying to, make everybody the same.
Not everybody the same, but granting equality under the law, because we cannot make we cannot be communist here. Which, again, some Southerners think that Lincoln was a Marxist. I really don't see it, but not making everybody the same, but equal.
Yeah, and that's where we need that equality. It's equality under the law. We all have the same rights, and our rights are pretty simple. I think the Declaration of Independence, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, is a very good way to define human rights. It's it really, even though it's just three simple things, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that encompasses a whole lot. And yeah, we should be equal under the law. But as individuals, some people are going to be successful, some people aren't, and a lot of times people who are successful have been, they've not been successful, and they've become successful because of their losses, and they've learned from their mistakes, and that's what life is about. From under the government, we're equal under the law. As individuals, we need to be unique and be willing to try new things, and learn from our mistakes. And, I think that's one of the reasons we should talk about the Civil War and have honest conversations about it, is learn from, look, the heinous act of slavery, it had to be ended. I agree. There are a lot of abolitionists, a lot of people were very much against slavery who also opposed the Civil War because it wasn't the right way to do this. But I had a point that I kind of lost. But it just, we're all equal under the law, and we should fight for liberty and individuality and oppose central control.
Well, yeah, even the famous line from Jefferson's Declaration of Independence that all men are created equal. Many people think that it's only rich white man. No, to what Chief Justice Taney said, and quite something that people don't realize, that when back in the old days when they meant all man, they included women, they included everybody. So when I read all men are created equal, I read as everybody's created equal, because they're all fighting for the same cause back in 1776. And keep in mind that, even women had rights. Maybe they didn't have voting rights, but they certainly had their Bill of Rights. I mean, I can give you the perfect example. Lizzie Borden, she was... people make the claim that she murdered her father and stepmother. She went to trial. She wasn't denied her due process. She went to trial and she was found not guilty of those murders. So, that's something that you can't say for certain individuals of the colors of their skin, that, they were found guilty of crimes that they did not even commit, and they were sent to prison, or even worse, hang. And very sad, but at least women didn't endure that. They were treated under the law. So when I read Jefferson's Independence document, all men are created equal, I think he meant everybody. I just don't think he meant rich white men. I think he meant the whole lot of them, because even women played a role in the War of Independence against Great Britain. So again, it all deserved to be equal under the law. And sadly, many southern states, didn't want to give it to certain individuals of black skin. But yet Wisconsin gave that freedom. Pennsylvania gave that freedom. So why is the National Congress denying that liberty of that state and saying, no, we're going to come up and we're going to take those people out of your state and give them back to South Carolina? I mean, maybe those citizens are functioning citizens of Pennsylvania and they're contributing to the Pennsylvania economy. You shouldn't be taking that. That's an invasion of state sovereignty. That's not what the framers intended. So again, I still think that, we're all equal under the law. We're not privileged under the law. And, this thing we can talk about the next time, where this sense of, many Trumpers are saying that, there is no white privilege and blah, blah, blah. Yes, there was white privilege. Plessy versus Ferguson is the definition of white privilege. Denying the rights of black citizens to, aboard a Louisiana first-class car, and he had to go to coach, is white privilege. Only whites were allowed to be in first class and not a black citizen. That is white privilege. So to all those Trumpers that make this claim of white privilege, there was white privilege. Now, there's a reverse racism with affirmative action, that now it's black privilege or minority privilege. That shouldn't exist. Nothing of that should exist. So that's something we can talk about in the next session, where the white privilege, I'm tired of hearing this, debunking this white privilege from these Trumpers. And, there is no privilege under law. It's equality in the law. Even it says in the Supreme Court, equal justice under law. So we just have to bring it together.
Yeah, and I would say to that, on a basic human level, putting aside what the laws said, on that level, I'd say there's no such thing as white privilege, black privilege, Asian privilege. We're all the same in terms of our humanity. and that's the way we're supposed to look at things. But yeah, when it came to the law and the way the laws were written, there have been times where they've favored white people. There have been times like today they favor minorities. But then again, although I recognize when it comes to like police brutality, there have been plenty of cases of white people being brutalized by the police. But it's true, you see a lot more minorities being beat up by the police, and I don't say this as the police are always wrong. Sometimes the police are justified in what they do, but we do see a lot of cases where unjustified police actions against citizens of all colors, but it does tends to affect minorities more. But it's on a personal level, we need to recognize we have no privilege because of the color of our skin, and then we need to fight to make sure the laws recognize that. And the law has not always recognized that, and we need to correct that when that's the case.
Yeah, that's a good quote, Seth. Say it again. The last thing you said. As individuals, we need to recognize that there should be no privilege for the color of our skin. We're all equal on the basis of our humanity, and the law has not always recognized that, and we need to fight to correct the law when it hasn't. When it has favored one class over the other. Mm-hmm. No, that's true. Good point, Seth. So, but anyway, my last thought is, we need to keep correcting until we finally make everybody equal and no disparage. Now, as you said, the police has sometimes attacked both sides, both races, but yet again, you see it more in the media that the police have attacked minority individuals. George Floyd and Rodney King, even O.J. Simpson, who was O.J. Simpson, he's more white than black, but even O.J. Simpson, he was mistreated at times. But then you see Jeff Dahmer, and they gave him a little bit of privilege and didn't really bring answers to him of what he did. We need to find equality in the law and stop this privilege and stop this nonsense and just treat everybody as humans, as you said, Seth, and treat everybody equal in the law, treat everybody equal as human beings, as individuals, and by the law is equality.
Yeah.
So what's your last thought of this is what, Seth?
I think we need to learn from history. Learn from the Civil War. We need to learn the lessons from it. We can't change history; it's already happened. But we can learn from it, and if we're going to learn from it, we need to have an honest discussion about it. I think there's a lot of dishonesty when it comes to the Civil War, and there's a romanticization that shouldn't be there for the Civil War. We should. We just need to learn from it and, kind of recognize what was right about the comments that were coming from that time and what was wrong and correct the mistakes that have lingered from that period.
Exactly. I think we had a very good, powerful discussion. I hope people will take to effect, and we'll be back with more to discuss this issue that affects state sovereignty and federalism. And with that note, have everybody a wonderful Thanksgiving weekend. You too, Seth, and stay safe and be thankful for what you had, and have yourself a great night.
Good night and happy Thanksgiving.